Hi everyone, Hi Marcus. I declare the special meeting of the Port Phillip City Council well and truly open, and I welcome members of the public who are here tonight. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit clan of the Bunwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. Council has a local law that determines how this meeting will be conducted, and in accordance with this local law, there is no provision at this special council meeting for the public to ask questions on general matters, just childcare, the Childcare Services Review. However, there is an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question or make a comment on a specific item in tonight's agenda, and there's really only one item on the agenda. If you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please complete the blue form that's available at the table just outside the chamber and hand it to a staff member. I encourage you to limit your questions and comments to 3 minutes, and I'll try to be reasonably robust in enforcing the 3-minute rule, and try to avoid repeating points that someone else has made, even if you really agree with it. Please note that all council meetings are now live streamed. Please also note, in accordance with the local law, that this meeting cannot be filmed or audio taped unless permission has been granted by the Mayor. And in the unlikely event of an emergency situation, please follow the instructions of the Chief Warden. If you want to make a contribution, which you're all here to do, you sit in that seat over there and press the middle button to make sure that this little red light turns on, and then we can hear you and record you. And I'll ask you to say your name and suburb prior to asking a question or giving a comment. So, number 1, apologies. Councillors, do we have any apologies? No, we don't. All the seats are full. 2, declarations of conflicts of interest. We have one conflict of interest in a matter being discussed tonight, which is Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Councillor Gross. I, Councillor Marcus Pearl, declare that in relation to item 2.1, Every Child, Our Future, Policy Issues and Options Paper, hearing of submissions, that I have a direct conflict of interest in this matter.
Thanks very much. I'll now move to the presentation reports. We have one report, Every Child, Our Future, Policy Issues and Options Paper, hearing of submissions. So this is the moment where we get to listen to you. The whole purpose of tonight's meeting is to listen to your submissions, and we really welcome them. We're not going to say much at all, and at the end of your submissions there's an officer's recommendation which essentially says that we receive the report, we receive your submissions and questions and go home. So this is all about the Childcare Services Review. I've got a list, and on the list I've got about 10 names. So let's go from the top. The Community Alliance of Port Phillip, represented by Treasurer Anne Byrne. Anne, hi.
Thank you very much, and good evening. It's good to be here tonight, and it's also really good to see so many submissions into the report on childcare. The Community Alliance Port Phillip believes that Council should continue to directly provide services to the community, particularly the childcare services. We strongly support universal service provision with extra support to centres for their care of vulnerable families, rather than targeted services. Universal provision is what the evidence review prepared for Council by the Murdoch Children's Research Institute says provides the best outcomes for vulnerable families. Universal services also provide better opportunities for integration with other community services provided by the Council and other service providers, such as maternal health, child health, star health, etc. In its own documentation, Council recognises the importance of children's services, not just for children, but for the whole community. CAP questions the importance placed on the application of national competition policy in guiding policy options. CAP understands that national competition policy comes into play through a complaints-based process, and in order to be prepared for a complaint, the Council may need to undertake analysis. We note that you did such a financial analysis, I think, in 2017 and 18. However, such an analysis under national competition policy requires more than a financial analysis. It requires a public interest test. CAP is of the view that once this assessment is complete, particularly the public interest test, it will be found that it is not in the public interest to apply national competition policy to Council's direct provision of childcare services. In establishing public interest, CAP believes that Council should recognise that the provision of early years services is an essential service from an equity perspective and for community development as it increases involvement in the community and workforce participation. There are real economic and social benefits to the city that should be articulated by providing a direct council service. Whilst there is now an established market for early childcare education and care services in Port Phillip, the document Every Child Our Future recognised that there are certain market failures. It is CAP's contention that only Council's direct service provision and support for not-for-profit services would alleviate these failures. In establishing policy, the Council should be cognisant of the effect on the community of individual market failure if there is no Council provision. There is no guarantee if Council were to discontinue direct service provision that not-for-profit community providers would be able to take over the management of all the services. And also markets do not support equitable distribution of services, and so Council will be less able to achieve your policy objective 1 if it is not a direct service provider. Therefore, CAP encourages the Council to really think about the application of national competition policy, ensuring that your childcare provision is a universal provision, and it's our view that the ongoing involvement for delivery of daycare is probably the area of childhood intervention which is most relevant in addressing issues of childhood vulnerability. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Yes, sure.
Just one clarification. Thank you very much for your presentation then. When you say that ensuring that universal childcare is achieved, what do you mean? A universal as opposed to... What is the term a universal service actually provision?
The provision of a universal service, that childcare centres are open to all members of the community, no matter...
And what's the antonym of that, or as opposed to what?
That some childcare services are only open to certain groups of the community because of the charging fees, which may mean that only certain groups of the community can afford them. And then there may be other services which are in fact only open to people from lower income families because they're subsidised in some way, and that's how you're looking at childcare. In our view, that's not the way to provide childcare. The evidence suggests when children are in a childcare centre that has the full cross-section of the community, it is better for all children.
And so the targeting of subsidies is in some way, not necessarily in a bad way, but in some way contrary to the ideal of universal.
No, it's not, because you can target subsidies for individuals within childcare centres that are being provided for the full cross-section of the community.
Thank you.
That's okay.
I might ask, whilst you're there, Anne, Tony, in relation to competitive neutrality, I was going to ask about the issue of Mr. Keenan about what happened at Hobson's Bay when there was an issue with competitive neutrality.
Through you, Mayor.
Sorry?
I can
Sure.
answer that if you like.
So a point of order, so I have to...
Oh, so,
Thank you. Sorry, it's just a clarified process. So normally we would receive public submissions on the document, and then we might raise councillor questions of the officers at a later point. Can I clarify what the procedure is going to be tonight?
Yeah, well, as I read the current... I think that's good to discipline ourselves so we don't meander and have too much of a conversation. In terms of ruling on the point of order, it is within the discretion of the chair to determine this flow of questions at this stage. I take your I take your point, though, that it's better if we don't. But I thought I would clarify that issue with Mr. Keenan. It's my meeting, and that was the advice I've received from the CEO.
Fine. I'm happy to accept your ruling. I'm just conscious that we've got a lot of community members who would like to put their views forward tonight, and we should listen.
But I let Councillor Brand have a go. So, yeah. Okay. So could I just ask for that to be clarified, Mr. Keenan?
Through you, Mayor. Hobson's Bay, they didn't do an NCP assessment. A complaint was made by a private provider which triggered an investigation from the regulator. The regulator found that it was a significant market, that they had a significant market share and were in breach, but they then had the option of doing a public interest test, which they chose not to do, and then they exited. So the public interest test wasn't carried out by Hobson's Bay. They had the option of doing that. So the regulator found that they were a significant part of the market, that they were in breach, but the way to alleviate that was to exit or to do a public interest test, which they chose not to do.
Thank you.
And anecdotal evidence suggests that they then withdrew from the market, and now there is a shortage of childcare within that particular council. That has been the only complaint. There's been very few complaints under national competition policy.
Yeah.
And
Thanks
that is
very
the
much.
Only complaint on childcare.
Thanks. And the next one is the Ratepayers Association of Port Phillip, represented by Campbell Spence.
Campbell Spence, Middle Park, also representing the Ratepayers of Port Phillip Incorporated. ROP is concerned that childcare debate is one-sided, with many submissions coming from vested interests that completely ignore the cost to ratepayers. We agreed childcare is an important and acknowledge the research from the Murdoch Institute about the importance of early learning on the development of children. However, providing childcare services is not the responsibility of local government, which is funded at the state and national level. ROP is only interested in policy objective 3 in the childcare policy, which states that early years services will be financially sustainable and consistently aligned with relevant policies and legislation at local, state and federal levels. Council has stated in its papers that it cannot sustainably continue funding childcare under the current model of operating its own childcare centres. And this is because of increasing costs due to the high number of childcare workers, 100 council employed workers, meeting national competition policy requirements, maintaining and renewing the ageing assets, meeting demand for childcare due to increases in population. I would like to reiterate Mayor Gross's comments on the draft policy at the council meeting on the 20th of March, where he said that council has no statutory requirement to fund childcare, and many other councils don't. Council has spent over $21.3 million over the past 10 years, and the cost is growing. Council spent $2 million on council-operated services and an additional $1 million on community-run services, nil to not-for-profits and nil to privately operated services in 2017-18. Under the National Competition Policy, council would be required to reduce the level of subsidies and/or increase fees to cover the subsidised amounts to council-operated childcare. So the same scenario as Hobson's Bay doesn't arise here. Childcare, the council also indirectly subsidises childcare services through its partnerships with external not-for-profits by way of leasing council assets at a peppercorn rent. Infrastructure is ageing and requires capital investment. 59% of the assets are greater than 50 years old, and with 4 buildings being over 100 years old, only 41% of the assets were purpose-built for childcare. Capital investment required is about $2.6 million to bring the ageing facilities up to the National Construction Code and compliance with other national quality standards. In conclusion, ROP supports and recommends option C under the sustainable policy, which is council ceases operating council-run childcare services and transitions to not-for-profit providers, on the condition that the transition does not reduce the quality and the quality of services a number of places. Going to the last speaker's point, we don't want to see a reduction in places. We believe this option C will deliver what the council needs: financial sustainability, and it may involve selling council assets, removing middle-class welfare, a point I forgot to mention. At the moment, these subsidies are not targeted to low-income families, and generally the council is providing middle-class welfare. So, to conclude, we believe option C will reduce the burden of costs to ratepayers while maintaining places and services. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Spence. Lady Forster Kindergarten, represented by President Amy Demidrook. Hi, Amy.
Hi. Thank you. And just to clarify, I'm actually no longer the president.
Yes, I thought this was an anachronism.
But I've somehow been roped in to represent the wonderful institution that is Lady Forster Kindergarten today. So thank you for having me. I did want to start by commending the City of Port Phillip in its endeavours with respect to this policy. Even down to the title, I thought we should just reflect on that for the moment. Every child, our future. I think, what I really love about this council is the innovative approach and its willingness to engage the community in the consideration of these issues. I think, again, through the title, this council recognises that every child within the City of Port Phillip has an entitlement to high quality early childhood services, including, in our case, we contend kindergarten, and that also the children of the future, not only of the City of Port Phillip, but of this country. So I think the attention focused on this policy is attention well deserved, and I commend the council not only on its commitment to this policy, but also the extremely collaborative and transparent way in which it's engaged with all stakeholders throughout the process. With that said, Lady Forster has issued a detailed submission. I don't plan to read that tonight. You're all capable of reading the materials for yourself. I did just want to take the opportunity to highlight 3 of the policy objectives and really just use that as an opportunity to demonstrate how, in our contention, the City of Port Phillip's continued support for community-run kindergarten services will actually help achieve, in my view, the majority of the policy objectives that you are seeking to achieve. I know we've heard focus on, one of the policy objectives, and that's certainly crucial. I understand that the council has got a difficult role to play in balancing the needs of the community and the aspirations of, community-run services such as ours, together with the ratepayers' desire to, see an efficient and use of ratepayers' resources. So if you'll allow me just to highlight 3 of the policy recommendations, I shall start. Actually, you know what, I'm going to start from the back. Policy Objective 7, I'd like to put this front and centre, which is that children will have access to natural environments which allow them to learn about and experience play in nature. This includes natural environments within the early years services. Now, a number of you have come and graciously spent time at our kindergarten. It's situated on the foreshore at Elwood Beach. Even today, there was Alison outside with 29 4-year-old children in raincoats and gumboots, traipsing up and down the foreshore, experiencing the natural environment. In our contention, that is the best way for children to learn and develop and acquire crucial life skills, and they do so in a manner that connects them with the coast and the country and the community in which they operate. So if you compare that sort of environment to some of the play centres that you'll see on not-for-profit and other centres run along the Nepean Highway, the kids up on the balconies have quite a different experience of their natural environment. And so I think, some of those council-run assets are situated in those incredible locations, and by continuing to support those, you certainly achieve your policy objective number 7, which might not otherwise be able to be achieved. Policy objective, I'll finish with 3, I'm going around in circles. Objective number 1 actually really goes to the heart, in my view, of what the council's seeking to do here, which is that you work with partners to ensure that every child, regardless of their abilities or background, will have access to affordable, safe, accessible, quality early years services to support development to their full potential. I love this policy objective. It's really aspirational, and in my view it goes to the heart of what this council is trying to achieve. And there's a couple of elements to that. I'll only draw out 2. One is really around affordability, and I just wanted to use Lady Forster as an example to highlight how council's continued support makes this sort of service affordable to the community. Our fees are currently $67 to $80 per day, compared to an average in the region of $143. So that's sitting in about half the market-based fee. In addition, our service has been able to set up an inclusion fund which provides fee waivers for children and families in need. And I reference this not really to, sing LFK's praises, although I'm always keen for an opportunity to do that, but I really wanted to demonstrate that our low fees are possible because we're utilising council resources. So in particular, the nominal rent that we pay for our premises means that we don't have to contribute to those costs. And this in turn has a series of flow-on impacts, particularly when it comes to inclusion. Am I out of time or about to
You
be
are,
out of
but
time?
just finish up.
Okay, I'll just be...
I'm interested in number 3.
Okay, all right, I'll get to number 3. I did just want to highlight the affordability point, though, because I think it's got a number of flow-on impacts for inclusion. And if you're only going to read one page of the Lady Forster submission, I invite you to read the page where we provide the statistics on the number of families, Indigenous families, families at risk, families from single parents, families with culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, because those numbers, that's the data that indicates that those children have got a secure place at a kindergarten that their families might not otherwise afford. So I did want to highlight that on objective number 1. I'll move on to number 3 and I'll cut to the chase. The council's got a range of options, on a spectrum which it's specified in its paper. So at one end of the spectrum, I think option A is around continuing to subsidise child services in the same way that it's currently doing, which is obviously, the gold standard from our perspective. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got option C, which is leave it to the market. I'm here to really implore you not to adopt option C because I think in doing so, it'll be really difficult to achieve some of those other policy objectives. I don't think you'll see private providers, even if they're not-for-profits, providing the same commitment to quality and inclusiveness. Their capital expenses are higher. Their fees will be higher. They will not have inclusion funds. They may not necessarily achieve the same quality standards. They may not necessarily achieve the same connections with community and space. But that's not to say we're stuck in the past and advocating dogmatically for no change. We, Lady Forster, are willing and open to considering innovative co-funding models with council. There must be options in which there are win-win solutions both for council and for these community-run centres. And what we're here to say to you tonight is that come and talk to us, and I implore you to explore those options before moving too far along the spectrum to option B or C. I'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Amy. Elwood Children's Centre, represented by Committee of Management member Penny Brown. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this evening's special meeting. My name's Penny Brown. I sit on the COM at Elwood Children's Centre. In attendance with me this evening is Elena DeMarco, fellow COM member. Elwood Children's Centre is a parent-managed, community-based childcare centre located on Tennyson Street, close to St Kilda Botanical Gardens. In a converted residential building, ECC has been operating on the current site since 1985. Today, ECC employs 16 full-time staff and provides long daycare, including all meals, and a funded 4-year-old kinder to 35 children per day. Presently, 55 families, 65 children between the ages of 12 months and 5 years, all call ECC their home away from home. Our centre's mission statement is a community-driven environment with a commitment to play-based learning where connections and individuals are cherished. ECC and the COM has welcomed the City of Port Phillip's review and appreciates the support it receives from the Council. We consider that these are fortunate times, and as a progressive society, we urge that the Council continue to support community-managed centres as they provide an integral service to the community at large, starting at the earliest age and at a grassroots level. We consider our society's fabric is strengthened when individuals are supported to achieve its work and its goals. We asked our educators to share why they loved ECC. They say, it's a safe workplace where we all look out for each other. The educators are all passionate and creative. We all work together as a team to provide a rich learning environment for amazing little humans. We asked our children why they loved ECC. Our 3-year-old said that they liked playing ice cream shops and climbing. Our kinder kids said that they love it because they get to play with their best friends, they love making pizzas, and the best part is playing in the mud patch. ECC advocates for small community-run centres and urges the City of Port Phillip to consider that not all families want their children to attend larger centres or hubs. ECC provides a safe, inclusive, culturally diverse, small family feel environment where the child is at the heart of everything we do. Council needs to ensure a good cross-section of types, sizes and models when deciding on their key recommendations. Community-managed centres are dwindling. Our centre's point of difference is its family feel. It started 35 years ago in the community, and once you remove these services, they'll never return. Speaking from personal experience, my 3-year-old son, attends the centre, and he's attended the centre since he was 7 months. He's the confident and joyful little person he is today because of his connections with his educators and his kin alike. I also look forward to my 2-month-old daughter Sunday attending ECC in 2020 when I return to work, and knowing that she'll be at ease with her brother in the same centre. As well as volunteering on the COM, I'm also part of the fundraising committee, and we work hard to raise extra money for the centre for much needed equipment and services for children. This is what you sign up for at a community-run centre. Do I love ECC? Unequivocally, yes. Is change scary? Yes. However, we find ourselves at a point where our backs are against the wall, filled with uncertainty in regards to our future. The recently proposed short lease of 11 months and our centre being categorised in red in the Children's Services Facility Asset Overview Summary as facility has no capacity to meet future needs without rebuilding. It is impossible not to feel that our centre is facing the fight of its life. So we know recommendation 6, our building, it's not contemporary. In terms of accessibility, we do offer accessibility and priority access to children within the community from vulnerable and unique family situations, low-income children and those with special social and emotional and medical needs. Currently, we are supporting a baby with significant hearing loss who will be having a cochlear implant in the coming months and a child with focal epilepsy. We also recently placed a family with specific support needs with a 4-week orientation period, as they had already unsuccessfully tried at 2 bigger centres which could not cater for their family situation. We can provide this level of extra care and support because we are a small centre. Policy Objective 6 has many hidden consequences for some services within City of Port Phillip, especially for ECC, through no fault of our own. This needs to be considered case by case, as not all services are derelict, but do need improvements to assist in making the building compliant. We pay our building levies, however, building maintenance requests are slowly turned around and not met, even in regards to trivial building matters. We also would like to reserve the right for an independent building review before any decisions are cast. We'd also like clarity on policy recommendation 3. There's no clear model delivery recommendations presented for community-run centres like ours. It again leaves our future in question. What are the opportunities to become an independent centre? Similar to the Avenue, we feel a lease-to-own option might be our only choice. Should this be an option for centres? Despite being one of the most affordable centres in the area, ECC is financially sound, with all profits and fundraising efforts 100% being reinvested into our staff's professional development and our children's daily lives, including equipment, nutrition, on-site experiences and regular excursions. All of these things have ensured that we continue to be rated as exceeding the national quality standard, something we're very, very proud of. Elwood is identified in your review as a neighbourhood with the highest proportion of working families, 68%. It makes no sense to shut down a childcare service. Finally, the review has increased a level of uncertainty, anxiety and fear at our centre amongst our families and staff. We're in genuine fear of families and staff abandoning a perceived sinking ship should we be earmarked for closure. So we're in an unstable position through no fault of our own. Who will cover the financial shortfalls in lost fees? We therefore ask, ensuring that the review doesn't cause uncertainty with family and staff, ensuring any impacted centres are given the longest lead times possible, confirmation to cover fee gaps if and when a centre has an end date, redeploying staff and families to similar like-for-like centres to ensure no one is put out and continuity of care is considered to ensure the smooth transition of children, carers, families. And are there suitably located options ECC could be moved to if the current site is deemed unviable and the lease to own isn't an option? Finally, we ask that the City of Port Phillip is the council that supports community-run centres, not the one that closes us down. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Penny. Sure.
Sorry. How small is your centre? What's the
Yeah,
nominal?
we have 35 children
35.
a day.
Including at one time my son, but anyway.
Yes, I believe that. Yes, we're very proud of that.
He's 32 now.
A good human being, I'm sure.
Debatable. Thanks very much. Any other questions? No. Good. Thanks very much, Penny. Elwood Community Playgroup, President Bernadette Snowden.
I think it's on. Is that on? Yes.
Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors and council officers for your effort you've put into children's services over the years. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what we think. A lot of it's in our submission, which you'll read in due course. We're proud that council shows the way in their support of playgroups. Elwood Community Playgroup is often visited by local, national, overseas people to see our wonderful facility, copy our model and learn from us. We've been able to do this because of council support. The contribution of council is unmeasurable and we thank you for that. Our Community Playgroup runs 42 two-hour sessions a week for over 300 children every week, 7 days a week. We've found it difficult to digest all the paperwork for this process and work out how playgroup is impacted. Even after conversations with council officers, we believe we've been disadvantaged and unable to put our best foot forward on this response. Our council has an opportunity to lead the way by supporting the opening of a special needs playgroup in the city of Port Phillip, ideally central to all residents. We also need to further tap into special interest groups such as dads groups and sole parents. We currently run dads groups and sole parents groups, and I think we might be the only service in the city of Port Phillip doing it. But funding is needed to keep these going and extend the reach into the community. Playgroups are an untapped way to support children. Let me explain that further. Children's services often focus on the child and sometimes on the parent, but very rarely is there an opportunity to focus on the parent and the child together at the same time, and therefore positively impacting the child. Right now, the talk is about educating children to lift improvements, and that's great, that's perfect. However, sometimes when we do that, it can send a message to some parents that perhaps they aren't good enough to be teachers of their children, and they can lose confidence. What if we coached and educated the parents and the child together and put that into practice? I think this is a place that could be explored. We support that playgroups like ours should operate in each suburb, ideally allowing as many people to walk, run, ride, scoot, and be open 7 days a week. We understand there is a cost to this. However, there are many intangible benefits to the community from local community-led organisations that aren't costed or were not considered in the papers presented. Having dedicated facilities is a large factor in the success of parent-led playgroups as well, and we thank you again for your support. We have over 80 volunteers a year. Volunteers feel more connected, make new friends and contribute in positive ways that are again not considered, yet are highly valued and required to make society work. Yet again, I didn't see that come through clearly on all the papers and the process that we've been through. Would I sign up as a volunteer again? Absolutely. You can't pay for this reward and you can't replicate this engagement and outcome in the for-profit sector or the government sector. You take away that support, particularly in assets, and you take away those gains. Council should risk being amazing and be trusted. Risk is often a negative position. What if the risk was that your children's services were amazing and that you considered world-leading? Not many people would argue against that. I think City of Port Phillip can take this risk that you will be amazing, but work is still needed on this policy in many places to get it working. I would like to express my gratitude for our committee members and members who've helped form our positions, and thank you for your time and effort.
Thanks, Bernadette. I've got the next one on the list is the Eildon Road Children's Centre, but there's no name beside it. Is anyone coming from there? Have you filled out the blue form?
Sorry, the blue form.
The blue form.
No, sorry, we haven't filled the...
That's it. Could I ask you to read your name and suburb into the microphone for the record?
Yes, so my name is Louis de Sax. I'm a member of the Committee of Management. And so I guess I give you an additional challenge with a strong French accent tonight.
May we?
So that's okay. So yeah, tonight I'm representing the Eldon Road Children's Centre. So it's a community-run childcare with 44 spots located in Eldon Road next to Fitzroy Street. And I'm just one of the parents sitting on the Committee of Management, helping the director of the centre running the business. And also I just wanted to acknowledge all the work done by council and council officers on the policy, so thank you for that, and the opportunity to give that submission. There are probably three main points that I want to highlight tonight on behalf of Eldon Road. So the first point is in regards to recommendation 3.1, which is probably the most controversial one, I suppose. In summary, on that recommendation, we think it's very important that the council ensure there is still a good balance and that the mix of non-for-profit and privately run childcare continues, because in our view that's critical for achieving the affordability objective, and it's also critical to achieve the quality objective. A couple of points here to support our views is that your information package shows that it costs you $20 more per day if you put your child in a private centre. So if council is suddenly disengaging from running centres and also stop supporting community-run children's centres and childcares, you're likely to see a significant increase in price of the childcare. So that's a critical point. The other element in recommendation 3 that was surprising is all the emphasis around the national competition policy, which I think one of the person in my place before felt the same. It doesn't seem very strong to base the whole policy on that. There is just one instance of that, I guess, policy having been used to sort of ensure the council was removing his involvement in childcare centres. So we don't feel that's a strong argument. So that's really two points around recommendation 3.1. The second point is around the building. So obviously being able to run the centre in a council-owned building is, I think it's probably, without this we couldn't be running a childcare centre, and we don't think it's community-run childcare centre can own the building or should be owning those buildings. So our view is that council should continue to support community-run childcare centre through providing buildings. We acknowledge the issue around, I guess, the compliance of those buildings, but we think surely there are practical solution, cost-effective solution to put those buildings to standard. Because as somebody highlighted before, they're often very, well located, and having smaller places like this ensure everyone's got access to a childcare centre within 5, 10 or 15-minute walk from their place. And the last point we wanted to make is that, in our view, council's got a role in monitoring the market response to childcare demand. and I think one way of doing that is also being very transparent with applications that come through. So, for example, we are aware of an application that comes through for Church Square in Eldon Road. So I guess having transparency around those applications and helping new entrants to integrate smoothly within the existing environment, I guess, in our view, is the role of the council as well. I think that's the key 3 points we wanted to make tonight. So thanks for your attention.
Thanks very much. The Avenue Childcare and Kindergarten, represented by President Louise.
Thank you. So I'm the president of the Avenue Childcare Centre in Balaclava. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Sorry, Lou, could I get you to speak more directly into the...
Is that better?
And name.
Louise
Hurd.
Hurd.
Yeah.
Formerly of the City of Port Phillip, currently of Elstonwick. Shame.
We forgive you.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak, make a submission and participate more generally in the review. The Committee of the Avenue is a long-standing committee that has a proven track record, along with centre management, of operating a financially viable, highly utilised and highly valued service in Balaclava. We provide high-quality long day care from 6 months old. We have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old kinder program, and do this while maintaining very competitive fees, which place us in the lowest third of providers in the municipality. We are proof that small centres are able to be viable and financially self-sufficient, and as a committee we strongly reject the implication that you have to be of a certain size in order to operate a viable centre. To that end, I'd like to again point out that the availability of the Victorian Government's grant program, which is mentioned a number of times throughout the policy documents, has been misrepresented in the review paper. Grants are in fact available for a centre of any size to do certain works, with funding capped at $350,000. Larger grants for total rebuilds or new builds have the requirement for 66 places, but the smaller grants do not have a requirement in terms of places. As some of you know, we have been engaging with the council, both councillors and council officers, for at least the last 5 years in relation to our centre and much needed upgrade works. We've previously made an offer to co-fund the required works, and that offer still stands. We are particularly interested in any opportunity that may exist to acquire the building on mutually acceptable terms, as we believe that this would provide benefits to both the centre, the community and the council. As a committee, we see significant opportunities for efficiencies, both monetary and time-based efficiencies, if we were able to take control of the building and its maintenance requirements and its operations more generally. Finally, we'd just like to reiterate our desire to explore any option in an open and transparent manner with the council to acquire the building from the council on mutually acceptable terms that would enable us to continue to provide the highly valued service we provide in an area of the municipality that is relatively underserviced for long day care, childcare and kindergarten. We make a number of other comments throughout both of our submissions, which we provided again as part of this process more generally in relation to the policies, and we'd welcome having further discussions with any of you if you'd like to talk to us about any of our views. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillors, any questions?
No.
Well, I have one question that I perhaps might ask the CEO. Yeah, that's the Avenue Childcare, represented by President Louise Hurd. There's this, question about the offer to purchase or take over the premises. What sort of rules are there in terms of that? Sorry, in terms of the transfer of the property to the community group. Have I got the words right?
Yep. Well, sale.
What are the sort of laws that we would have to observe in relation to that offer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I might ask Mr. Savinkov to help me. I'm sure there's a community land disposal, asset disposal process under statute. Mr. Savinkov, can you help me on that?
And I don't think we need to answer it tonight, but it's a big statement.
In short, there would be a statutory process. We'd have to do statutory consultation on any land disposal. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
That's correct.
So could I just ask, so that would be, what, a consultation and a process to avoid open competition?
In transferring land, there's a statutory process that involves notifying the public of the intention to transfer the property, taking on board, taking submissions, considering those submissions, and then making a decision.
Thanks very much. I just thought I'd clarify that because it's a big statement, big offer. Thanks very much, Lou. Linda Davidson, co-order of Clarendon Children's Centre.
We're a team here.
You're a team? That's fine. Can I suggest that you get that chair over there and... Could I ask you to read both your names into the record then?
My name is Kate Hall. I'm the Director of the South Melbourne Childcare Cooperative, commonly known as Neighbourhood House, and I'm with Linda Davidson, the Coordinator of Clarendon Children's Centre. We're also representing Bernadette Dow, the Director of Ada Mary Beckett Children's Centre, and our submission on behalf of the 3 centres. Our service quality ratings consist of 2 exceeding and 1 excellent rating. Between us we have over 100 years of experience and knowledge in early years education and care, of which the vast majority have been achieved in the City of Port Phillip. We acknowledge and appreciate the City of Port Phillip's long and proud history of actively supporting community managed services, which has gained the Council an outstanding reputation. We sincerely hope that this strong connection and partnership will continue so that all partners can draw on each other's strengths and expertise. Our commitment is that we believe that in community-owned services, we are willing and more than happy to assist and offer other services our expertise, as we have in the past, in the transition to community management. We acknowledge the difference between community-owned services, not-for-profit, as opposed to corporate services, not-for-profit. Ultimately, we are committed to our own services, community-owned services, and children's services in the City of Port Phillip.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the finances. You've got our submission there, so we're not necessarily talking directly to that. I was interested in a previous speaker's reference to many of the submissions being from parties with vested interests, and I would say, of course, and so they should be. In fact, I would expect that everybody has a vested interest in ensuring that the children of this municipality, of this state, of this country have the best possible start in life and in education. That is fundamental to the future of all of us, and so of course there are vested interests. The idea that supporting children's services is ignoring the needs of ratepayers is, I would say, a nonsense. Families who live in Port Phillip, who may be middle class, who may be wealthy, have every right to expect that a portion of their rates will contribute to the high quality education and care of their young children. It is not middle class welfare to support children's services, and as Kate referred to, Port Phillip has a very long and proud history of providing excellent education and care, and it would be a sad, sad day when we saw that end. I think in terms of the way that council does support children's services across the municipality, there are a number of ways that happens. In long day care services, the innovative and highly successful quality subsidy, I think, is very well targeted, and it really speaks to supporting and maintaining high quality education and care, and I would urge you to see that as one of your priorities. But in terms of dollars, I would also say that when council is quite rightly considering how they expend ratepayer money, how they support children's services, that let's not just look at the dollar value of what is going on here. There is a difference, for example, between simply a not-for-profit service and a not-for-profit community-owned service. And I think when you're weighing up the costs and benefits, do not ignore the social capital that comes with a strong community-owned sector. It's really important. I was speaking to a family at my centre recently, and the mother, who has lived in the city of Port Phillip her whole life, said she had never felt as connected to her community as she has since her child commenced care at our centre. And I'm not suggesting that it's just about our centre, but I do think there is a real strength in that community-owned model that the city of Port Phillip would be very remiss to lose. They're probably the main points that I wanted to make, and as others have said, if any councillor would like to come and visit our service, would like to talk to us more, we've certainly in our submission made suggestions about the ways, if you're determined to move away from direct provision of childcare in the 4 centres that council currently operates, we would urge you most strongly to look at transitioning those services to a community-owned model of management. Not just a not-for-profit model, but community-owned, and certainly not to sell those services off to the private sector. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't think... Kate? Kate? Sorry, I've just got your name down again. They've both spoken? Okay. Thanks. Sorry to bother you. Okay. Isabel Oderberg? I owe you a telephone call, don't I?
You do.
I'm
I'll find
sorry.
you. Don't worry, I'll find you.
Yeah, I get that.
So I'll try and speak quickly because I prepared and I didn't realise there was a, what did you say, 3-minute limit? In Leonoro, a language spoken in Western Uganda, I should emphasise, Isabel Oderberg, I'm a resident of St Kilda and a parent, and one more on the way.
On the way.
In Leonoro, a language spoken in Western Uganda, there's a proverb that says, Omwana takulila nju moi. The literal translation is, a child does not grow up only in a single home. You may also know it by a different translation, it takes a village to raise a child. I've lived in St Kilda my whole life. My ties to St Kilda are extremely strong and stretch back to when my grandmother arrived as a refugee in this country and ran Monarch Bakery on Ackland Street. 4 days a week, my son attends North St Kilda Childcare Centre. We tried several other centres before we found North St Kilda, and it changed our lives. Not only did it provide the best possible care for my son while we work, but it also provided us a deeper and more meaningful relationship with council services. My husband is a proud Aboriginal, Biripi and Dunghutti man. I am Jewish. My 3-year-old is our didgeridoo. My daughter, who will be born in September, will be the didgeridoo Mark II. After my son was born, the Port Phillip Maternal Child Health Nurse Service helped us get through the toughest of days. When he got a bit older, story time at the public library got us out of the house and interacting with other kids and parents. This year, my son attended the Yalakut Willamnari Festival with his dad and celebrated the world's oldest continuous culture. A lot of this involvement in community started with our attendance at North St Kilda. I'll be forever grateful for the amazing workers at the centre for the care and love they have shown our whole family and respect with which they have treated our culture. Not just tokenistic, but a true understanding and respect. There are many ways in which council-run childcare excels in the sector. The level of accountability is greater at all levels of council. Access to professional development and for staff and educators is at a high level. The level of support is higher in terms of all staff having a clear and direct reporting line to experienced professionals who can provide guidance and have insight into early childhood development. There are opportunities to collaborate and gain different perspectives working within the council, making it a richer experience for staff. It encourages connection with other council services, a gateway and a beginning to a relationship with the community and the council for young families or even carers and grandparents. This is particularly important with vulnerable families. Over 6,000 people in Port Phillip live in social housing. Educators undergo stringent orientation and are required to complete specific training in things like security, child safety, confidentiality and much more. It gives a greater understanding of the operation of council and of the services it provides and creates a better working culture because the staff feel part of the community. The centres are embedded in a holistic way, meaning they can identify vulnerable families, for example, and provide better support systems. A true celebration and embracing of diversity is what we've experienced, rather than tokenistic gestures. This is something I've experienced myself with my son. The staff use gatang words with him and treat his intersectionality with total respect and love. There's extraordinarily low staff turnover, which provides consistency for children and families. Another mother who's here with me tonight, Shella, attended North St Kilda as a child. 30 years later, her daughter attends the same centre. One educator who cared for Shella when she was a child still works as an educator in the city of Port Phillip. In its own mission statement, the City of Port Phillip says it aims to put our community first in everything that we do. It cannot be overstated how much of this is so in council-run childcare centres. To abdicate responsibility for the care and education of our youngest and sometimes most vulnerable constituents would be shameful, especially when previous generations have had access to this invaluable service. Parents and constituents responded overwhelmingly in the Council's own consultation that they want to leave council childcare involvement as it is, unchanged. If that's not possible, the second most popular option is allow parents to pay more to subsidise the service. I understand the purported issues of competitive neutrality as it has been raised in the context of this discussion, but as it stands, this theory has not been tested. Irrespective, parents have said overwhelmingly in your own consultation that they are willing to pay more to assist subsidising the service, therefore removing some of the issues of council over-subsidising. Council-run childcare is something that can and should, as both residents and councillors in Port Phillip, make you extremely proud. I am asking you to please do what is right and what is in the community's interests, especially our smallest residents. It takes a village to raise a child, and we are that village, and we collectively bear that responsibility.
Thanks, Isabel. And that's the end of the list. Councillors, over to you. Any questions or resolutions? Sorry, we've got one more speaker. Oh, Bernadette Snowden, she's already spoken. Oh, okay. Go for it.
Bernadette Snowden from Elwood. This is my personal response to make that clear. Thank you again for all listening to me. I'm a reasonably educated and experienced person, and yet I still don't understand entirely what is going on after reading, I reckon, around 300 pages. Geelong Children's Service Policy is 5 pages long. It is clear and easy to read. I found it difficult that this scope was agreed and did not include key services, even though I brought this up through the process. The image problem that this presents is that this policy is all about assets. And I feel that Council have lost trust here in the opportunity to have the robust discussion and the conversations about the issues and opportunities. I've looked at the child services policies in Glen Ira, Geelong and Kingston. They included family daycare, occasional care, immunisation, maternal child health nurse, out-of-school hours care, holiday care, breastfeeding support and parenting information sessions. None of these were included. Any children's services policy should have included these, and I would suggest there's still time to do that. Also, I'd like to ask if this was considered a public interest test, the survey. Maybe not to be answered now, but at some point. Family daycare does occur in the city of Port Phillip. I've known many being provided. I imagine that Council have misread the national data and looked at the service providers who may be out of the area, as they can be, but have family daycare operating in the city of Port Phillip. I urge Council to include family daycare in their thinking and even lean off the city of Glenora, who run these as a service provider. Family daycare provides an income for many families and keeps children local, as well as providing local care in-home options for families. Occasional care also provides much needed support for families, especially those who are non-residents of Australia but are ratepayers or live in the city of Port Phillip, who cannot access long day care as they have no access to rebates. I have plenty of friends who are from overseas who are struggling and cannot go into long day care. They cannot afford it. They're paying full GP costs, full vaccination costs, and they are struggling and need other support that is not available. Fathers. To quote Associate Professor Richard Fletcher, fathers are invisible in many places, and this is endemic. Not because people dislike fathers, but because the system is set up to be focused on mothers. I've had to ask childcare and school to include my partner on all communications. The paternal child health service does not actively include nor check his mental health, and this problem also extends to anyone who's a secondary carer. Are we really only engaging the primary carer still? My partner matters. His health matters. Our family health matters. And yet in 2019, this is not considered. You help the entire family, you help the child. We need to do more in this space by leading the opening and support of dads groups. You might look at the city of Port Phillip and say we're doing really well, but we have homelessness, drugs, crime, burglaries, etc. Our mental health is not where it should be. Getting in early with children and family is one key way to improve this. Targeting funding to parents and children has lasting positive impacts that include reducing isolation, improving connections and sharing information in formal ways. The best way is through not-for-profits and council-run centres whose interest is motivated for the child, not the dollar return. For-profits, by nature, have a clear objective: to make a return for the owner or the shareholders. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask officers if they can outline next steps, process from here.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Simic. The process from here is that officers will be considering all of the feedback and will be undertaking a workshop with councillors on 7th of August with a view to bringing back to council for final decision on the 4th of September. And obviously there'll be further briefings with council along the way.
Councillor Baxter and then Councillor Voss.
I guess I'll just ask a question of the officers about, Bernadette Snowden's mentioned that other councils include a whole raft of, she listed a whole bunch of things in their child services policy. Could officers just respond to that and why we've gone with the parameters that we've gone with?
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Baxter. The other services, most of those which Bernadette mentioned are offered, and we have separate policy on the council. The scope of this was specifically looking at those 4 areas: early childhood education, kindergarten, playgroups and toy libraries. That was the scope of this policy. But we run a range of other services for children and families. We could look at broadening, including those in this, but this specific scope of this was looking at those 4 areas.
Councillor Voss?
It was a similar question to mine. I just wanted to understand why the scope of maternal and child health was actually out of scope. If you could just elaborate on that, that'd be useful.
Through you, Mayor, I'm unable to answer that. It was before my time here when the scope was determined. I'm not sure if... no, I don't think any of my colleagues are. I can take that on notice, Councillor Voss.
Any further questions? No? Councillor Baxter?
So we had the representative from the from ROP, I think Ratepayers of Port Phillip group, that was talking about our expenses here. Do officers have any data? I guess this will probably be taken on notice on if we were to cut all of these services and presumably this group would want us to invest that into a rate cut of some kind, that what kind of money would even go back in people's pockets if we did do something like that?
Through you, Mayor, the figure that's mentioned applies in the draft policy, applies specifically to the 5 council operated, so there are altogether 14 council owned services. 9 of those are community managed, 5 are operated by the council, and council's already made a decision that one of those will transition to community management. That's the one Barang Janang, and that was council's decision when that was opened 2 years ago. The NCP test identified that council subsidises 2.04 million above parent fees and government grants to those 5 centres, so that would be the amount. However, some of that relates to back of house expenditure, so that wouldn't necessarily all be returned.
Sorry, just through the Mayor, to clarify, we're just at the policy options stage at this point. It would depend on the length of the transition period, and that would obviously be quite a lengthy transition period, so it'd be difficult to quantify any full cost savings, because we're just at the policy options point at this
So
at
I'll
this
just
stage.
clarify, my question wasn't about cost savings. My question was that figure, if that was actually returned to ratepayers, how much money would each ratepayer on average get?
I think through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's difficult to throw figures around when we're at a policy option stage and council has not decided on an implementation option, and in any option there's going to be a long transition period, so it's difficult to quantify that and throw a figure around.
And can I just warn against asking officers to ask highly politically charged questions that they can't answer?
Mr. Mayor, please, that wasn't a politically charged question.
Councillor Voss?
Couple of questions. One of the, Ms Snowden talked about playgroups earlier, and read the document and really didn't understand how playgroups would be affected with this report. Are you able to give some articulation around potentially how playgroups would fare with this report in its current state?
Through you, Mayor. There's 2 main recommendations concerning playgroups. I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but one of those concerns establishing a memorandum of understanding with playgroups so that we're clear about what playgroups and the volunteers that are involved in playgroups can expect from council and vice versa. and the other one concerns looking at the accessibility and availability of playgroups and trying to make playgroups more available to families within our municipality.
Thank you. There was one of the speakers spoke about her stress. Sorry, I'm just trying to look who it was. Miss Brown, about her from Elwood Children's Centre. The stress caused by that centre being highlighted in red and identified as not being sustainable. I understand they've got a short-term lease of 11 months left, I assume, and given that we're not looking at making any decisions until September, that's when it's coming back, just to answer this, and the need for the families to have certainty. How are we going to do that when there's not going to be very much time, I don't know what the answer is going to be with this, but it doesn't seem like it's a great position and their stress is only going to get worse.
Through you, Mayor, I've been working with officers of the property section. There are 3 centres that have 11-month leases. The aim of that is to get them all to align with the other centres, and we're working as a high priority to get an extension available to those 3. We need to work out what's a reasonable extension, given that Council haven't made a call on any policy options, but we would. No, I was about to make a policy for Council, then I won't do that. We would think that it would be pretty easy to work out a reasonable timeline that would protect Council's interest in not wanting to be locked in through leases before they make a policy, and providing certainty for families and children.
So this is about alignment of lease dates rather than a call on the future of the centres.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. There are three centres that have 11-month leases, so that it means that all of the leases will then align. They'll all end on the same date, so we can then issue new leases to all centres.
Thanks very much. Councillor Voss and then Councillor Crawford. You're right, Councillor Crawford.
So 2 of the centres, again Elwood and the Avenue Children's Centre, talked about lease to own, that they're quite keen to explore that. And I know you did ask the question before. This is a little like the chicken and the egg situation. Have we explored what that means, so that we're in a position to make a decision before we make a decision on the Children's Services report? Because I think we need all that information available to us. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Very preliminary. I can't say it. We've had some look at it, but we understand that will be something that we will probably need information on to make a decision about on the 4th of September. So one of the officers before highlighted that there will be some statutory requirements around anything if Council was so inclined to go down that path.
Councillor Voss?
So does the recommendation, should Council wish to do that, need to change to include that investigation, or would you be happy to take that on?
One of the recommendations is to explore co-funding and lease-to-own arrangements. Yeah.
Councillor Bond?
Just so that we accurately reflect the submission from the ratepayers at Port Phillip, one of the options available to us is to transition the 5 or 4 remaining council-run childcare centres, given we've already made a decision to transfer one to a community-run centre. To transfer the 4 remaining into a community-run centres, the savings to us would be roughly $2 million a year, give or take, transition costs. That is one of the options available to us, is it not?
Through you, Mayor, correct. It would be that is one option, to transmit to Not-for-profit is broad. All the community managed centres are not-for-profits. Most of them, I think, are incorporated associations. I think some may be companies. But there are those community managed not-for-profit centres which currently operate 9. And then there are other faith-based not-for-profits as well. The issue of the 2.04 million, that was the money, as the CEO referred to, that was the rate that was looked at in terms of the NCP testing. It would be highly unlikely, as in any implementation, if council were to recommend such a policy change, I would imagine that would have to be implemented over a period of time. So the actual amount would be very difficult to pinpoint, as the CEO pointed out before.
Councillor Bond?
And then any savings that may materialise as a result of that at some point in time in the future, when savings kick in, that could go to any purpose that council wishes that to go to, including reduced rates or anything else, roads, rubbish, anything we choose to put it towards.
I'll ask the CEO to answer that one.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Councillor Crawford?
I just feel for our community who are listening to a lot of what we're referring here, we're not giving them any assurance or thanks. So can I just clarify for everyone sitting here or who has contributed, we have made no decisions at this point. We are just accepting submissions. And can I just clarify, the one that we're referring to that will go to being community run was a decision made at the opening of the Faraz Street. So that was a decision long before the childcare review and was always going to be handed over, just so that no one's thinking we're making any decisions. So could I clarify that, please, for the community, that there have been no decisions made on any other centres that we may have a hand in?
Through you, Mayor, 100% correct. That decision predates me, and I'm not sure if it predates the council, but no, this council made that decision that when Faraz Street was built at Fisherman's Bend, that it would transition to... Previous council, okay. That it would transition to community run, and that the decision was made that that would happen after the first 2 years of operation.
Councillor Voss.
I'm going to go back to the question I asked before about the investigation for lease to purchase and co-funding. It's not in the recommendation for tonight. It's in the recommendation, the policy recommendations. Just wondering, I think it needs to be done before we get to that point. And I'm just wondering, should it be going into tonight's recommendation to do that analysis?
Through you, Mayor, it will definitely need to, I may have confused the matter before, it would definitely need to be considered for the final policy, but you raise a good point. It's been raised, it's been brought up in the consultation tonight, so yes, we can undertake to do that work.
I'll just answer the Councillor Voss's question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think it needs to be specifically in. We will do that work. We also have to look at it in terms of the broader facility strategy, so we'll do that work. I don't think you need to include it in the Council's decision tonight, Councillor Voss. We'll do the work.
Do I have any resolutions? You're happy to move the officers' rec? Thanks, Councillor Simic. Seconded, Councillor Voss. Councillor Simic, do you wish to speak?
Just very briefly, and thank you, Mayor, and thank you everyone who's made it here tonight, but also to the roughly 500 people who've participated in the consultation so far. We've received around 450 survey responses and over 40 people have sent through submissions on behalf of their organisation or as individuals. So this has been a very thorough and quite a large consultation process, and commensurate with the fact that this is probably one of the most important changes or possible changes that as a council we're going to have to grapple with. I agree with what many of the speakers tonight have said about how important childcare services are for the future of our children. education is truly the premise of all progress, and particularly in those very early years of people's lives, we have to make sure that as a community we're doing everything possible to ensure good outcomes for our children. So I won't say much more. I think we've had a very good discussion tonight, and like we said at the start, this is really an opportunity for us to hear from people directly and hear people's concerns. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all councillors by saying that none of our doors are closed. We really value ongoing conversation and communication about this topic, so feel free to get in touch with us independently or collectively if you'd like to keep talking. I'd also like to reiterate that, like we've clarified tonight, no decisions have been made in regards to the policy. We've had a number of options outlined to us, and as councillors, I know that there's a whole range of views already on some of those options submitted, but we are not making any decision until we've consulted with the community properly and explored all of the options properly, and there's still quite a long period until September until a final decision on a way forward will be made. So thank you for coming tonight, and I look forward to an ongoing dialogue on this topic.
Councillor Voss.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Simic. I too share the same thoughts, and just wanted to say to everyone, thank you very much for coming out and supporting your community and certainly the children around this particular policy. It's really important that you have participated in this, and it's fantastic that we've had, around 500 participants in this process. It's been well subscribed to. We've had Initially, it went out for 4 weeks consultation, and we heard from many members of the community that that wasn't long enough. So I was really pleased that we were able to increase the amount of time that it was out for consultation to 6 weeks. So that actually meant that quite a few more people were able to participate in the process. The results of the 8 key findings outlined in the Stage 2 engagement report strongly align, to where I'm seeing this going, and certainly what I'm hearing from most of you here tonight. And I think it's very likely that's where this review is going to land. So I was quite interested to see where that. But we still have such a long way to go, as you heard tonight. We still have to look at the lease to purchase options. We've got to look at our buildings. We've got to understand so many other things, let alone our council finances side of things. 0 to 5 years old is probably one of the most important times in our children's life, and especially the first 1,000 days. All of us, I know, as a council, are particularly concerned about the welfare of the community, but we all come from different places and what that actually translates to. So it is controversial, and it is causing a lot of worry in the community, but I have to say that we are also worrying about the outcome of this, and really hope that it turns out that it's the best outcome for our children and our families. So thank you for your submissions and for your time tonight. Thanks.
Councillor Brand, and then Councillor Baxter.
I certainly support all the things that have been said so far very strongly, and I too think this has been so far a really great consultation process. And I'm very proud of the process that we've been through. I think in saying that, I think I have to acknowledge, a few bits which were, especially in the policy statements and the way it was set out in the survey, there are problems with it. There are things which were said a little bit too simplistically, I think. I think in particular under 6.1, the way the dot point options were set out was, I would acknowledge, that it was sort of rather highly angled, and I think it would have been better if it was the pros and cons were set out properly, and the possible consequences and possible workarounds, that sort of thing. I think there are another couple of points like the discussion on the national competition policy. It needed a lot more filling out, and I think the question about the 66th place cut-off limit was not understood well by the community because it was probably not stated well in the process. There are things like that I don't think were ideal, but it did actually have the effect, I think, of calling out a lot of people to get more agitated maybe than they were, and I think the result has been a fantastic response, which I'm really proud of too, as a sort of a community. Having read most of the feedback, I wouldn't say all yet, but having read most of it, it's really impressive, and it's a great combination of knowledge and wisdom and passion and agitation, and it's really impressive. And I certainly will be. I've learned a lot more about childcare. I've visited a lot more childcare centres. I'm geared up and I'm keen. And I'll be looking at those particular issues, the competition policy and the funding cut-offs and things like that. And I think I can assure you that we'll all be doing a lot of work between now and August, and we'll be talking to you all a lot more in that period too. So thank you so much for your contributions tonight, and in writing it's massive and it's fantastic, and it shows well that childcare really is at the heart of our community, and we are, I think, all very, very aware of that. I won't go on, but I'm just very, very impressed with what we've seen represented today and what we've received over the last month or so.
Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I know everybody's thanked you, but thank you. This is actually one of the more highly engaged consultations that we've done, and there's a reason for that. And so I really appreciate that people have gotten involved. Hearing some of the stories of people who are being cared for by the same person that care for their parents and stuff like that, that always brings a smile to my face. It's always really lovely. Likewise, it was somewhat upsetting to hear of the anguish that some people are going through when they feel that their centre's on the chopping block. And that's something that I want to try and reassure people that even if, some centres are on short-term leases while we work this stuff out or whatever, there's no sort of done deal or anything, no decisions have been made. But as Councillor Brown said, some of our communication on this has unnecessarily sort of upset some people, I think, and I'm willing to take responsibility for that, as are the rest of the councillors. I'm sure we can do better. But I really want to emphasise that what we're talking about here is what we all want here is for the kids to actually get the best outcomes. And so I really want us to focus on that, and not as an economic argument or so much of an assets argument, although those things definitely come into it and they're important to consider. It's far more important for us to be considering what's going to be the best outcome for the children than can we get a rate cut, can we get $10, $15 back in someone's pocket. Maybe, but that's actually not the most important thing. The important thing is what is the best outcome for the children. If transitioning out of childcare and doing all these things, handing it over, letting the market handle everything, leads to those outcomes, which I'm certainly not convinced of, but if that were the case, we could look at that. But the fundamental outcome that we're looking here is those improved outcomes for all of the children, regardless of where we go with it. And so I really want us all to be focusing on that, and everything else is important, but not necessarily the most important thing. So, and that's what all of you coming here to talk about your experiences and your input has helped hone that and sharpen that as a focus in our minds, I think. So, thanks again.
Any others? I'll have a go. Sorry, Councillor. This is going to be the most contested conversation in this particular council. And part of the reason why it will be contested is that, unfortunately, things can't, in my view, for me, stay the same. Let me tell you a story. So we went on a bus trip, and we went to a fantastic community-run childcare centre. We were happy, they were happy, everyone was happy. We proudly got on the bus again. And then we ended up in a not-for-profit childcare centre at the base of a public housing. I could see it needed at least $700,000 worth of work. The kids were the most vulnerable. In some of our, and how much money do those kids from those vulnerable kids in that under-maintained childcare centre get from this council? Zero. Zero. It appalls me that we have allowed a situation to arise where the most vulnerable kids don't get the support from council. Now, of course, they're on CCB. It was, in some ways, a fantastic place, but it needed support that we were not giving. In fact, I've been a councillor for too long, and it was the first time I'd been there. So it was with a sense of almost shame that I realised that the resources of this council aren't being targeted. Now, the Murdoch review that we sought mirrored an exact same review. I was on a government committee looking at a social issue, and it said that the most cost-effective way of making this society a better place is to support poor, vulnerable, socially exposed kids to addicted parents or violent parents or whatever. We have to support those people, those kids. And we have to be straight with ourselves about the people who are not in this room. The people in this room are high functioning, and it warmed the cockles of my heart to hear the Elwood Childcare Centre talk about the vulnerable kids that they support. I congratulate you and thank you for that work. But things can't stay the same. We have to make sure that we perhaps have a systemic review of the way money sloshes around in this very complicated system. And I feel in my core that we have a duty for the under-twos or the first 1,000 days to do the best that we can for all the children, and including the children of the parents who aren't in this room tonight. The other group of parents who aren't in this room tonight and didn't come and speak to us, of course, are the private system kids. I mean, they're still children too. They don't turn up here. They haven't had a voice tonight. We need to take that into account, both because that is a fair thing to do, and that is a proper thing to do, and that is a lawful thing to do. Because when we talk about competitive neutrality, it's easy to stigmatise as a, commercial, hard-hearted view, but it is also about a degree of fairness. I don't care about private childcare operators, but I do care about the children in that system, and I do care about very vulnerable kids, littered throughout the system, but found in some not-for-profits. So tonight, in one sense, has been a really uplifting night where the parents, mainly mums, of kids who love their children, love their community and love their childcare centres, it's incredibly uplifting. What's not to love? But we have to take account of the people who are not represented here tonight. And some of those people absolutely don't need our help. They're not here because they don't need to care, because, they're wealthy and we don't have to support them. But there are people who will never come to this chamber because they're poor, they're drug addicted, they've got a violent spouse, whatever. So I just say, you know, I sit here listening to the evidence and testimony tonight, and I'm so inspired by all of the love, dedication and competence, sheer unadulterated competence on display. But I just have to warn you that my particular view is to take all of this information on, to take everything that the council officers are writing, and to make sure that we take the research of the Murdoch Institute and implement it. That means that things will change if we do that. Councillor Simic, do you wish to close? Oh, Councillor Copsey and Councillor Crawford.
Thank you. I'm just going to echo what other councillors have said in terms of the great level of engagement of our community. My nightmare scenario for this was that we would not get a level of engagement. We get to the pointy end of things and then suddenly people would start realising that we were looking into children's services. I should know by now not to doubt the passion and engagement of our community, so I've been really pleased to see the level of engagement, and particularly I wanted to say thank you for the level of detail that's been put and the level of thought that's been put into the submissions we've received. They've really engaged with the complex issues that we're trying to balance as Council reviews its approach to children's services. We haven't reviewed this policy in many years, and so it's appropriate that we make sure that we're delivering a service that actually meets the needs of our children in the municipality and takes into account the changed context, federal and state, that's happened since we last created our review, and also looks at the great history and commitment that we are lucky to have in the Port Phillip. I hope that we can take all of the submissions that have been made so far into this process, and I have confidence that the officers will spend a great deal of time incorporating those suggestions, looking at the changes that can be made as we move through to the final options that will come to Council for decision. So really, that was just a very long-winded way of saying thank you very much for your real investment in this process. It is absolutely core to delivering good outcomes for our community, that we deliver good educational and play and community inclusion outcomes for children at the start of their lives. So thank you very much for taking it as seriously as we hoped you would.
I'll keep it quick. I know you all want to get home to your kids probably. I think the thing that struck me tonight is what's so interesting is that you can't measure the value of something just by the bottom line. And I think that's what we're sort of contemplating here too. But if we wanted to take it into money terms, we also, for what I can see, previous investment, have got a lot of bang for our buck from the community in this space, such an important space. But really, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come here tonight and to write your submissions prior and actually turn up on a cold and wet night. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet.
Microphone on. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thanks very much. I'll now move on. There being no further business, I declare the special council meeting closed.